The camera would have captured everything. The white dress, pristine and flowing. The nervous laughter echoing through a grand cathedral. Family members dabbing their eyes with handkerchiefs. But there was no camera that day in 1982. No photographer to freeze the moment in time. Because when Ozzy Osbourne and Sharon Osbourne said "I do" in a small Hawaiian courthouse, they'd never imagined they were trading away the wedding of their dreams for something far more precious: survival itself. For over 4 decades, this has been the one regret that haunted the couple who survived everything rock and roll could throw at them. The missed wedding day that never was. Until now. Picture this. It's 1979, and Sharon Osbourne is 26 years old. Sitting in her father's plush Beverly Hills office. Don Osbourne, known as the most feared man in the music industry, has just fired his latest client, wild, unpredictable singer with a reputation for biting the heads off bats. That singer is Ozzy Osbourne, and Don wants nothing more to do with him. But Sharon sees something her father doesn't. She sees a broken man who needs saving, and perhaps, more importantly, she sees her own chance at independence from her controlling father's empire. The decision to manage Ozzy wasn't just professional. It was personal rebellion wrapped in business strategy. Sharon had grown up watching her father manipulate artists, control their careers, and destroy their spirits. But with Ozzy, she saw an opportunity to do things differently. She would become not just his manager, but his protector. His anchor in a world that seemed determined to destroy him. Their early days together weren't romantic in any traditional sense. Sharon spent her time pulling Ozzy out of gutters, literally and figuratively. She'd find him passed out in hotel rooms, surrounded by empty bottles and the wreckage of another night gone wrong. She'd clean him up, get him to the next gig, and somehow keep his solo career afloat. When everyone else had written him off as a has-been from Black Sabbath. But somewhere in those chaotic months of 1980 and 1981, something shifted. Between the late-night phone calls to bail him out of jail and the early morning rushes to get him to recording sessions, Sharon began to see past the madness. She saw the gentle soul underneath the wild exterior, the man who wrote love songs in quiet moments between the chaos. And Ozzy, for his first time in his adult life, found someone who loved him not despite his demons, but enough to help him fight them. The proposal, when it finally came, was as unconventional as everything else about their relationship. There was no grand gesture, no bended knee with a carefully planned speech. Instead, it happened during one of Ozzy's more lucid moments in 1982. Sitting in a dingy hotel room somewhere on the American tour circuit. "We should get married," he said, almost as an afterthought. Sharon laughed, thinking he was joking. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something she'd never seen before: hope. They both knew what they wanted. A real wedding with Sharon. In a stunning white dress, surrounded by friends and family who had supported them through the madness. They dreamed of a ceremony in England, perhaps in a beautiful old church, with proper vows and photographs they could treasure forever. Sharon had been planning weddings in her head since she was a little girl, imagining every detail from the flowers to the music to the perfect moment when she'd walk down the aisle. But life had other plans. Ozzy's visa issues were mounting, threatening to derail his American tour and potentially destroy the momentum of his solo career. Immigration lawyers delivered an ultimatum: get married immediately to an American citizen, or face deportation and the collapse of everything they'd built together. The dream wedding would have to wait. Survival came first. On July 4th, 1982, Independence Day, though the irony wasn't lost on either of them, Sharon and Ozzy found themselves standing in a courthouse in Maui, Hawaii. Sharon wore a simple sundress, not the flowing white gown she'd imagined since childhood. There were no bridesmaids, no flower girls, no emotional father walking her down the aisle. Just a judge, 2 witnesses they'd grabbed from the hallway, and the sound of their own nervous breathing. The ceremony lasted exactly 7 minutes. 7 minutes to legally bind two souls who had already been through more together than most couples experience in a lifetime. But even as they signed the marriage certificate, both Sharon and Ozzy promised each other that someday, somehow, they would have the wedding they really wanted. The wedding where their love story would be celebrated properly, where Sharon could, where the dress of her dreams, and where they could invite everyone who had believed in them when the rest of the world thought they were crazy. Years passed, and that promised wedding day never came. Life kept getting in the way, as life tends to do. There were tours that stretched for months, recording sessions that consumed their days and nights, and always, the ongoing battle with Ozzy's addictions. Sharon became pregnant with their first child, Amy. Suddenly their priorities shifted to building a family rather than planning the perfect wedding celebration. The 1980s brought incredible success, but also incredible challenges. Ozzy's career reached new heights with albums like Diary of a Madman and Bark at the Moon. But his personal demons grew stronger with each passing year. Sharon found herself playing multiple roles: wife, manager, mother, and often, crisis counselor. She was the one making the tough decisions, whether it was about Ozzy's career or his treatment programs. The wedding they'd promised themselves seemed to slip further and further into an impossible dream. Then came the 1990s. And with them, a new kind of challenge. Sharon was diagnosed with colon cancer in 2002, a battle that would test their marriage in ways they never could have imagined. Suddenly, the woman who had spent decades taking care of everyone else needed care herself. Ozzy, despite his own struggles, stepped up in ways that surprised even Sharon. He was there for every treatment, every doctor's appointment, every moment when the future seemed uncertain. It was during Sharon's cancer treatment that they both realized something profound. They had already had their real wedding day, just not in the way they'd expected. Their true wedding had been happening slowly. Over 20 years of choosing each other again and again through every crisis. Every triumph, every moment when walking away would have been easier than staying. But the dream of that perfect ceremony never fully disappeared. In quiet moments, Sharon would still describe to friends the dress she would have worn, the flowers she would have chosen, the way the sunlight would have streamed through stained glass windows. Ozzy, in his more sentimental moments, would talk about the speech he never got to give, the promises he never got to make in front of the people who mattered most to them. As they entered their 60s and then their 70s, both Sharon and Ozzy began to feel the weight of time in a new way. Ozzy's Parkinson's diagnosis in 2019 brought a sobering reality to their daily lives. The wild man of rock and roll was slowing down, and Sharon, ever his protector, was slowing down with him. They began to talk more seriously about legacy, about the things they wanted to do while they still could. The idea for their tribute wedding came not from Sharon or Ozzy, but from their children. Amy, Kelly, and Jack had grown up hearing stories about the Courthouse wedding in Hawaii, about the dreams their parents had set aside for practicality and survival. They had watched their parents sacrifice again and again for the sake of family and career, always putting their own desires last. In 2023. As Ozzy's mobility became more limited and Sharon's own health challenges mounted, their children decided to give their parents the gift they'd never given themselves. Working in secret for months, they planned the wedding Sharon and Ozzy had dreamed of 41 years earlier. The location they chose was perfect: the garden of the family's Buckinghamshire estate. The same place where Sharon and Ozzy had raised their children and weathered their greatest storms. It wasn't a church, but it was sacred ground in its own way, their place where their real life had unfolded, where their love had been tested and proven true over and over again. On a golden afternoon in September, Sharon walked down a petal-strewn, all wearing the white dress she'd imagined as a young woman. Though now it was chosen to accommodate Ozzy's wheelchair and her own more careful movements. The dress was elegant and appropriate, but it carried the same significance as any. Fairy tale gown. This was her moment, finally arrived after 4 decades of waiting. Ozzy, despite his tremors and mobility issues, insisted on standing for the ceremony. With Jack's help, he rose from his wheelchair as Sharon approached, and for a moment, the years fell away. Here was the wild young man who had first captured her heart, and the devoted husband who had spent 40 years proving his love was real. The vows they exchanged weren't the traditional words they might have spoken in 1982. Instead, they were deeply personal promises that reflected the life they had actually lived together. Sharon spoke about choosing love over safety, about finding beauty in chaos, about the privilege of being the person who got to love Ozzy Osbourne not as a rock star, but as a man. Ozzy, his voice shaking but clear, talked about Sharon saving his life in every way a person can be saved. About the gratitude that filled every day they had together. The guest list was small but meaningful. Their children and grandchildren. A few close friends who had been part of their journey from the beginning, and some family members who had supported them through the years. Missing were many who had passed away, including Sharon's father Don, with whom she had eventually reconciled before his death. But their presence was felt in the stories shared and the memories honored throughout the day. The reception was held in the same garden, under lights strung between ancient oak trees. There was no wild rock and roll party. Those days were long. Behind them, instead, there was quiet music, gentle laughter, and the kind of deep satisfaction that comes from a dream finally fulfilled. Sharon and Ozzy shared their first official wedding dance to a song Ozzy had written for her years earlier. A ballad that had never been released because it was too personal. It's too precious to share with the world. As the evening wound down and guests began to say their goodbyes, Sharon and Ozzy sat together in the garden where they had just renewed their vows. Sharon still wore her wedding dress, though she had kicked off her shoes hours earlier. Ozzy held her hand with both of his. The tremors that usually plagued him somehow stilled in this moment of perfect contentment. Was it worth the wait? Ozzy asked, his voice soft in the gathering twilight. Sharon smiled, thinking of all the years between that rushed courthouse ceremony and this perfect evening. She thought of the battles they had fought, the children they had raised, the careers they had built, the love they had protected through everything life had thrown at them. Every single year, she replied, and meant it completely. The photographs from that September evening tell a story that no courthouse documentation ever could. They show a couple who had found their way to each other not once, but over and over again across 4 decades. They show the triumph of choosing love over convenience, commitment over comfort, partnership over pride. But perhaps more importantly, they show that some dreams are worth waiting for, even when the waiting lasts a lifetime. Sharon got her white dress and her perfect wedding day, just not in the way she had originally imagined. And sometimes, the dreams that come true in unexpected ways are the most beautiful ones of all. The wedding they never got to fulfill became. In the end, the wedding they were always meant to have, not a celebration of young love and hopeful promises, but a tribute to mature love and promises kept. It was a reminder that the best love stories aren't about perfect beginnings, but about choosing to continue the story, chapter after chapter, year after year, until the very end. Today, as Ozzy and Sharon face the challenges that come with aging and illness, they do so with the knowledge that they finally kept that promise they made to each other 41 years ago. They had their dream wedding, and it was everything they had imagined, and more, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, earned through decades of devotion and tested by time itself, in a world where celebrity marriages often seem disposable, where love is treated as a temporary emotion rather than a lasting commitment. Sharon and Ozzy Osbourne's story stands as a testament to something rarer and more precious. Love that endures. Love that fights. Love that waits patiently for its moment to shine. Their final tribute to the wedding day they never got to fulfill became In the end, the most beautiful wedding of all a celebration, not of what might have been, but of what actually was and what will always be.